Hello and welcome to Hyper Production. My name is Rory, and in this episode today I'm going to be showing you the Arpeggiator MIDI effects plugin within Logic Pro 10. So I'm going to open up Logic here, just going to start a new project. Doesn't really matter what we're going to call it. For a software instrument, we're just going to pick Retro Synth because that's pretty easy to use. Okay, so obviously when you start up an instrument, you're going to get all the usual bits and gubbins. So your tracks and then obviously the sounds that you want to select for that particular software instrument. Now the MIDI effects section is only going to appear on a software instrument. This doesn't work with audio, obviously, because it's going to be affecting and processing trigger notes, so MIDI information. Okay, so we click on that. Alphabetical order, Arpeggiator. So we're going to click on that. And here we are. In all its glory, the Arpeggiator. Okay, so the interface of this is probably one of the easiest arpeggiators I think I've ever used. Got a play button here. This is basically your on and off switch. So do you want the arpeggiator to play or do you not? Lit up, it will be on. Click it, it is off. I'll explain these two little icons there in a minute. Latch, this is your sustain, if you like. So if we play a note and then take our finger off, the note is going to stop. But if we click latch on, it's then going to carry on that note. That's quite handy if you're playing chords, and instead of like taking your hands off to then play another chord, you're going to get a slight gap in between the notes, so a bit of silence. So latch is a perfect way to then play your chords, let go, play another chord, and it's just seamless gap in between. Okay, you've got two buttons here, so delete last and clear. I'll explain a little bit more about those in a minute because that is dependent on the mode. Down in this middle section here, we have note order. So the rate is pretty self-explanatory, so that's how quickly the note's going to be playing. Obviously, it's all tempo synced to your DAW's tempo, global tempo. So up here for us, it's 120 BPM. So if we play it here, we've got on 16th notes. And if we take it down to 8th notes, and all the other bits in between. Okay. Next up, we have the sort of note order, if you like. So we've got ascending. So if I play a C major, it's going to be going from the root note up to the 3rd and the 5th. Okay, I'm going to just lower that a bit slower so you can hear the order of the notes. So here we go. So dun, dun, dun. So that's going to be C, E, and G. Okay, and then if we want to do the descending, obviously indicated by the point down arrow, we're then going to obviously have the G, E, and then C. Okay, and then obviously this is going to be going up and then down within the same sequence. Okay, and this one is going to be alternating, so it's going to go from sort of, if you play 4 notes, it's going to be going sort of like that. Obviously, I think that's dependent on how you play it. There's a bit of a mystery behind this, but obviously it's down to what notes you play down first. So it's trying to find the beginning of the circle with that one because you played that one first. But yeah, there is a bit of mystery behind how that one works. This one's just totally random. So that's just going to be playing any notes that it wants to, really. Bit of a mind of its own. Now this hand one, that's basically, it's playing the notes, what you're actually playing. So whatever notes you hit first, it's going to be playing that. So... Okay, so it's going to be doing like that. The lock button, I'm not entirely sure what that does. I used to think it was to lock it to the last note that you played, but I'm still unsure as to whether that's actually true. Variation, so this is going to be a variation of the grid, which I'll explain in a minute. So it's just variating your patterns which you're playing. Octave range is to jump up between octaves. So if I play C major, that's literally going to be playing within that octave there. Okay, now if I stick this up to 2, so you hear those 2 high notes? That's up this end, so it's gone up to the 2nd octave, and obviously with the 3rd and the 4th, it's going to be going up those octaves as well. Now down this bottom bit here, we've got a couple of sort of information parameters that we can set and have a look at visually as well. Pattern is just basically live pattern, so whatever we're playing, it's going to be displaying that. So the pattern length is determined by how many keys we're pushing down within that note. Chord. So if we play a, say, C add 9th. Okay, so it's obviously determined by how many keys we're pressing down. Now grid is what we can make. We can essentially design and custom make our own sequence. Okay, so we're not determined by how many notes we're pushing down. Okay, so then we set that one up like that. So it'll work better with a single note to explain. So say we've got 12 steps. And then it'll come back round again. Okay, now the blocks here, so the up and down bits, these little tower block things, that's your velocity. Okay, so you can sort of hear a little bit as it goes a bit quiet. So I'll do it a bit extreme here, just so you can sort of hear, and then you'll kind of get a gist as what I'm on about. Okay, so that's just set your velocity, and then you can do a blanket sustain here. So if you drag it across all the way like that, that's just going to hold that note until you get to this bit here. Okay. Okay. Now there is a bit of it's a bit difficult to navigate sometimes, so you can shorten it there, and then obviously depending on how much you want to drag it within that, will shorten your note length. Okay, and then do that, and drag it off across again, and again. So you can sort of depict. So going across way is depicting your note length, and going upwards is your velocity, so how hard the sound is, because obviously you get a lot of various different timbres from instruments depending on the velocity that you play them. Okay, so that's pretty self-explanatory. Obviously you can pick different patterns that are built into the plugin, so your presets if you like. Next along, pattern, we have options. So we have note length, velocity, swing, and cycle length. Along with note length and velocity, you have a randomization parameter, which basically will just, depending on what percentage you set it, is dependent on, will basically be affecting how much of that either note length or velocity you want randomizing. Okay, so note length, so this is pretty self-explanatory. Let's try and set this just on live for now. Okay, so you can make it go sort of a pizzicato to a staccato to then sort of a more drawn out note. Okay, and then the randomization will basically just pick for itself how random you want that to be. Is dependent on the percentage that you set it at. Okay, so it'll only be within the percentage that you set for the note length. So it's going to be 73% randomization within the 22% of the note length. Okay, so if we set that to 150. Okay, so you see it's going to just be setting random ones like that. Okay, and then with that you're going to be having barely any at all. Okay, so the extremes from a short note to a long note is then set by that. Velocity works in exactly the same way. Again, with the randomization, it's going to be sort of randomizing the velocity depending on where you set that. So we can have it just as played, which is how hard you push down on the keys is what it's going to be carrying on with. And then as we decrease the value of the velocity, that is when a lot of the velocity of the MIDI notes or what you're playing is going to become more uniform, and then all the way to a fixed velocity value. So you can set that to whatever you want and it will just sort of stick there. Let's take randomization off. As played. Sorry, just set it to there. So that's lightly and then hard. And then that is as played. And obviously randomization just sort of randomizes that depending on where you've got it set. Obviously it won't work for fixed length. And swing, this is quite self-explanatory, just adds a bit of a swing and then you set the percentage. Logic's got that in its own piano roll as well. So just set that a bit quicker and then you kind of get a bit more of a feel for it. Okay, and by default on the lower setting is set at 50%. I'm not quite sure why they've done that, because surely it would make more sense to have it at 0 and then you just go up to 100, but whatever. Cycle length is basically as played, like we mentioned with the grid, so it's either going to go with the grid, so here, so whatever you set it, it's going to go between that, or as played, so like we mentioned earlier with how many keys that you are pressing down. Keyboard, this is a really good way for, or really good sort of feature for live players especially. It's going to, with this keyboard bit, you can select what key you want to be in and also what scale you want to be in. And then obviously you can link it to the rate as well. Keyboard split, so you can have two basically different keys on the same keyboard, which is quite handy if you're quickly switching between songs or you have a key change within a song. Then the live player can then switch very easily rather than dabbling around on a laptop. And then the controller, so this is basically what MIDI you want to be controlled and where you want the MIDI controller to then end up. So the latch button up here is controlling the sustain, so that's why when we click it, it stays on, holds the note. And obviously destination is the latch, because that button would have been coded to be basically the ID class of it would be latch. Okay, so back up to here, there's a few things that I wanted to explain which were going on. So we'll start with these two functions here. When I press the note, or the chord even, it's going to give me some options to then drag out the notes. So the top one here is basically going to let me pull out the MIDI information that I'm playing. So if I do that and then click and drag, it's going to then output the chord that I'm playing. Now, the useful thing about that, you may be thinking, well, why do I need a MIDI region for just the notes that I'm playing? Well, you could be coming up with a chord, or you could have latch on and you could just be adding notes to a really, really nice, big, luscious chord, which you probably wouldn't have played with anyway, for those of you that might not be so musically theory inclined. You might not know what chord that you're playing. So if you could just add chords on, you'd be like, oh, I really like that chord, but I can't remember how I played it. Then you can just simply drag that out of it and then put that into your MIDI track, into the arrangement window. Okay. Another really good feature of this as well, which they added quite recently with the updates. If we're playing it, you can then drag out the MIDI that's actually being played by the plugin. Now, I don't know many arpeggiators that allow you to do that. I think Zeta 2 by Cakewalk let you do that, from what I remember. But it is a feature that's left to be somewhat desired on some other plugins, i.e. Complete Control, with their use of their keyboards, like the one that I've got here, the S49. You can use that bit of software which will then control arpeggiators or arpeggios, but you sometimes do want to output the information that it's doing there, because you might want to put it onto a different instrument, of course. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll sort of delete that for now. And then, like I mentioned here, so latch, you can just hold a note there. Now, what transpose is going to do, you can play like a C major chord. It will then register you're playing a C major. You can then press one note elsewhere and it will then play the major triad of what you've just played within that key. So if you've got C major, it will then obviously play C major. If I then press a single key, A, it will then play A major. Okay, let me show you. Okay, so although whether that's really useful or not, I'm not too sure, because you're not going to have many tracks with alternating. Well, basically just have all major chords. Might be a bit of it's a bit limiting in my opinion, but it's still a useful feature nonetheless. Now reset is basically what it means. So instead of, like we mentioned a minute ago, we're going to play a chord like a triad, and then if we press one note, it's not going to then play the chord like transposing. It's literally just going to play that single note. Okay, so we've got it here. Oh, let's switch latch on. But then if we play the one note, it's just going to basically only arpeggiate what you're playing. So that's quite a useful feature. So that's kind of come in handy for the people that, instead of having the gaps, so like here. So you get that nice seamless change within, well, seamless change from chord to chord. Okay. Now we have add here, which is another useful one. So we've got latch. We're basically adding chords onto it, and this is where the delete last and clear come into it, but I'll explain in a second. So add, we press one note, and then we're simply going to be adding notes on top of it. And then the delete the last button that we've pressed, or the last note that we've pressed, and then clear will clear the whole sequence. Okay, now this is what comes into play really well if we're adding notes and we're not too sure what the chord's going to be, and then we want to take out that chord or the arpeggiated sequence. So if we do latch, and then you can see here we've got the two options to take the MIDI away from that to make the chord, so the overall chord that we're playing, or the individual notes that the arpeggiator is doing. Okay, that's a really powerful feature for those of you that are probably not too sort of clued up on your music theory. You might stumble across an absolutely brilliant accident. Okay, so I hope that explains a little bit about the arpeggiator function. It's a really powerful tool, and it's great for coming up with some new melodic lines. You don't just have to use it for synths. You can use it for drums or anything, vocals or anything like that. You can come up with some really, really cool ideas. Just experiment, really. Okay, well, thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave any questions in the comments section below. And please don't forget to give us a big thumbs up, because that helps us out massively as a channel, and so we can continue to offering great free content. Thank you very much for watching, and take care, and I'll see you on another video.